Most people live their lives like they're watching a movie through a foggy window. They can make out the shapes, the movements, maybe even guess the general plot. But the details, the real story, that stays hidden behind the glass. The people in your life do the same thing. They let you see just enough to form an idea, smiles in the right places, words at the correct moments. But what's going on in the background? What thoughts never make it past their lips? What parts of themselves do they blur out before anyone gets too close? Carl Jung has the answer to all these questions. However, if you've ever opened one of his books, you may have, like most people, found his writing too hard to understand. That's why I've broken down his biggest and most complex ideas across all his books into easy to understand, digestible chunks all in one place. In 1944, Carl Jung was on the verge of death. After suffering a heart attack, he fell into a coma and had what he describes as an out-of-body experience. He found himself floating above Earth, gazing down at the planet from space. He could see the Earth's curvature, a view that he could not have known at the time, as images from space hadn't yet been captured. As he drifted through the cosmos, he approached an enormous floating rock, shaped like a temple. As he neared its entrance, he felt a deep sense of peace, as if he was about to step into a higher plane of existence. It was then that he encountered a figure, his doctor, who stopped him and told him he couldn't enter, that he had to return to life. A crushing sense of disappointment washed over him, but the moment he regained consciousness, he learned something shocking. The very doctor he had seen in his vision had died while Jung was in his coma. This experience demonstrated the concept Jung had discovered 30 years earlier, called the collective unconscious. We will take a deep dive into this and every other major idea of Carl Jung's, including how your dreams predict the future, how to uncover your hidden personality, why nice guys are the most hateful, why you should take coincidences more seriously, how to be immune to manipulation, and much more in this ultimate guide dedicated to the teachings of one of the world's most renowned and controversial psychologists. Why do we bury the dead? They will never know whether we do it or not, yet it seems unethical to even think about not doing so. It wouldn't do the now dead person any physical or emotional harm, nor would they even care. But still, you feel it is something that just has to be done. And the ancient Egyptians, Native Americans, Vikings, and nearly every other culture agrees with you, despite them having never communicated with each other, living on opposite sides of the planet, and in completely different time periods. They all have rituals for honoring the dead. In the same way we have always been scared of spiders, mirrors in the dark, and weird-looking dolls. These such phenomena, Carl Jung explains, are caused by the collective unconscious. According to Jung, there are two layers to your unconscious. The first is the personal unconscious, and the second is the collective unconscious. The personal unconscious is made up of thoughts, memories, and experiences that were once conscious, but you have now forgotten or repressed, largely made up of what Jung calls complexes. These are the hidden emotional patterns in the unconscious mind that influence how you think, feel, and behave. Imagine them like knots in your mind, made up of past experiences, emotions, and beliefs that are linked to a certain theme. These knots can form around anything important to you, such as your self-worth, relationships, fears, or childhood experiences. For example, if you have a mother complex, you may have deep emotional reactions to motherly figures, whether positive or negative. If you have a loving mother, you might seek nurturing people in life. If you have a critical mother, you might struggle with self-doubt or authority figures. Jung discovered the existence of these complexes through word association tests conducted in a psychiatric clinic. In these experiments, patients were asked to respond as quickly as possible to a series of words by saying the first thing that came to mind. Jung observed their reactions, noting any delays, verbal mistakes, or emotional responses that could reveal hidden unconscious thoughts. Through these tests, he realized that people were often thinking about deeply personal matters. yet their unconscious minds interfered and prevented them from expressing certain thoughts openly. This internal resistance indicated the presence of unresolved emotions or repressed experiences within the personal unconscious. The goal of Jungian psychology is to uncover these complexes and stop them from hindering your development. They are often the things you have overly emotional reactions to or have recurring thought patterns about. For example, if you keep thinking you're not good enough, despite evidence that says the contrary, then you have a self-worth complex developed at some point during your childhood. In contrast, the second layer, the collective unconscious, doesn't come from your personal experience, nor is it something you can acquire. The collective unconscious is inherited, the same way you inherit legs and arms just because you're human. It is something all humans share, containing our primal instincts and behavior patterns called archetypes. Archetypes are blueprints for human thought and behavior. They shape how you experience life, appearing in myths, dreams, and stories across all cultures. There are four main ones: the persona, the shadow, the anima or animus, and the self. These then combine and overlap in many different ways, presenting themselves as what are known as archetypal images. These are called archetypal images as they are symbolic representations of the four main archetypes. If you have a strong hero archetypal image, you feel a deep drive to protect others, while someone dominated by the explorer archetypal image feels as though they need to travel the world, adventuring into the unknown. If you are irrationally drawn to people with power, then you may have a strong ruler archetypal image. Such traits exist in everyone to a degree, but the most prominent examples are people like Julius Caesar, Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, and Napoleon. They all existed at different times and in different cultures, yet they all shared the same behavior pattern that made up the ruler's archetypal image. We will discuss the various archetypal images in more depth later in the guide. As you become conscious of your collective unconscious and personal unconscious, you start going through individuation, the process of discovering your true self, where you start forming your own distinct identity and discover your life's purpose. You establish a sense of self while still carrying the element of the collective psyche. The first of the four main archetypes is the persona. Jung described the persona as your outward identity you present to society, a mask designed by your ego in order to shape how others perceive you and to conceal aspects of your true nature. This persona is essential for functioning in the external world, allowing you to navigate social expectations and roles effectively. If your ego tells you that you're a hard-working and independent person, your persona will tell you to dress and carry yourself confidently in order to communicate your ego's self-image to the outside world. Jung outlines the two stages of the persona. The first is identifying that it exists, and that the performance the persona puts on is all right, as long as you know that it is not your true self. The persona only becomes dangerous when you're unconscious of it, or over-identify with it. Jung believed that when your persona becomes too dominant, the suppressed aspects of your true self inevitably rise to the surface, often in destructive ways. Jung calls this process enantiodromia. It occurs when the hidden, neglected parts of your psyche force their way into consciousness, sometimes leading to a crisis where you feel trapped between who you truly are and the persona you have maintained. This can result in either complete submission to an empty, artificial identity or a dramatic swing towards the opposite, previously suppressed traits. The peaceful, kind person whose ego suppresses their aggression and frustration, prioritizing harmony and avoiding conflict to maintain their persona of a generous, spirited person, will one day explode in a fit of uncontrollable rage, shocking everyone around them. They will lash out verbally or even physically, unable to stop the built-up unconscious energy from taking over. The young kid with strict parents who leaves home for the first time to start university has all the desires he's repressed for so long explode in the form of addiction, whether it be substance abuse, video games, or junk food. His newfound freedom gives him a complete personality change towards the opposite extreme of the person he once was. Carl Jung believed enantiodromia was a reaction caused by your psyche seeking the balance it has previously been denied. If you are someone who over-identifies with your persona, then you must move to the second stage, which is the disintegration of the persona. Because if you become too closely tied to a professional or social role, you risk losing touch with your deeper, more authentic self. If you were to become completely absorbed in your persona, like a professor who defines himself solely on his academic achievement, you become a shallow conformist, overly concerned about what people think of you. This excessive attachment makes you unable to separate who you are from the world around you, leaving no room for individuality. When your carefully constructed mask starts to dissolve, you are confronted with the raw, unfiltered reality of who you are beneath social expectations. This can be an unsettling experience, as it often brings a flood of fantasies, confusion, and chaos. The removal of the persona leaves you exposed to a more authentic self, stripped of external validation and pretense. In response to this inner chaos, you can choose to deal with it in one of three ways. The first is called negative restoration, where you may attempt to bring back your previous persona rather than embracing transformation, rebuilding your familiar social identity even though it's within the confines of a more restricted personality, re-establishing your reputation or clinging to an outdated self-image, resisting individuation. Jung criticized negative restoration, where instead of evolving, you return to the status quo, maintaining the illusion of your former self rather than taking a step towards self-realization, integrating the unconscious, and leading a more authentic, balanced existence. The second response is absence, which in contrast involves living without a persona. This leaves you struggling to engage with the external world in a meaningful way. Jung describes individuals without a persona as disconnected from reality, seeing the world as little more than an abstract or fantastical space rather than a structured environment that requires interaction and adaptation. Without a social identity to navigate daily life, you may experience a breakdown in psychological balance as the unconscious begins to overwhelm consciousness. These are the people who are often lost in their thoughts, unable to connect with others, and misunderstood by those around them. You see this in film characters like Donnie Darko, a boy who lacks a solid social identity, making him alienated from his family, friends, and school. He struggles to maintain a functioning persona, detaching him from reality and causing psychotic breaks, hallucinations, and the belief in a cosmic mission, ultimately leading to his gradual self-destruction. The third and final option you are presented with, after being exposed to your authentic self, having dissolved your original persona, is to put up an updated persona that is more realistic and flexible, but helps you navigate society without conflicting with your true self. To quote Carl Jung, at first, it might feel inauthentic, like learning to play a role, but if one cannot perform a social role, then one will suffer. Eventually, in the best case, the persona is appropriate and tasteful, a true reflection of our inner individuality and our outward sense of self. A well-integrated persona allows you to move through life with greater ease, maintaining a connection between your inner self and the outside world. Its reflection of individuality and an awareness of societal expectations serves as a balanced expression of your true nature, while also making you a more magnetic person to be around and interact with. When developed consciously, the persona becomes a useful tool rather than a restrictive mask, creating harmony between personal authenticity and external demands. The second of the four main archetypes is the shadow. The shadow is used to describe the hidden aspects of your personality that your ego has suppressed or denied. These are traits, desires, or emotions that you find unacceptable, either because they conflict with your self-image or because you fear they will not be accepted by society. Instead of acknowledging these parts, your ego pushes them into your unconscious mind as it tries to stop them from leaking into your persona, forming what Jung calls the shadow self. Even those who feel confident and self-accepting are not always aware of the parts of themselves they have rejected. According to Jung, the mind distances itself from anything it perceives as dangerous or unsettling. Instead of facing these traits directly, you unconsciously suppress them, pretending they don't exist. The shadow may include aggressive urges, irrational fears, shameful experiences, socially unacceptable thoughts, or desires that conflict with your values. These hidden aspects remain in the unconscious, influencing behavior in subtle ways until they are acknowledged and integrated into the conscious self. In Jungian thought, the shadow could appear in dreams and visions, often representing a figure of the same gender as you. The way your figure manifests depends on your personal experiences, since the shadow is partly shaped by your life and internal struggles. Facing the shadow is a crucial step in individuation. This process is referred to Jung as nakia, a symbolic descent into darkness where the ego loses its dominance and deeper self-awareness emerges, revealing hidden aspects of your psyche, naturally bringing the shadow closer to the surface. Often this confrontation is triggered involuntarily by a personal crisis or a sense of inner emptiness. If you are someone who prides themselves on being strong and independent, but suddenly fall deeply in love, panic and resistance may be triggered as you fear losing control or becoming too attached. The shadow you have been repressing now surfaces, rearing its head towards you. You start sabotaging the relationship or becoming overly jealous and possessive, surprising yourself as you never saw yourself as a needy person. If you're a perfectionist who always excels in everything you do, but then make a major mistake, whether it be failing an important exam, embarrassing yourself at work, or being publicly criticized, your shadow erupts, overwhelming you in shame, rage, or self-hatred because you can't accept imperfection. You might blame others, deny responsibility, or withdraw from challenges altogether, developing self-destructive habits like procrastination or substance abuse to avoid facing future failures. If you're a people pleaser who's always kind, agreeable, and self-sacrificing, but is then hit by a harsh rejection, maybe a romantic partner leaves you, a friend betrays you, or a group excludes you, your shadow takes control, making you bitter, resentful, or even aggressive. You realize your niceness wasn't entirely selfless. It was driven by a deep fear of being unloved. Your shadow now imbalances you, making you cold or manipulative to avoid feeling weak again. When the shadow is ignored, it becomes destructive. By confronting and integrating the shadow, individuals reclaim the parts of themselves they once denied. This process does not eliminate the shadow, but transforms it into a source of strength. If you are the person who prides themselves on being independent and integrate your shadow, you learn that getting into a relationship can make you a more capable person. If you are the perfectionist and integrate your shadow, you learn that failure is a part of growth and that your worth isn't based on being perfect. If you are the people pleaser and integrate your shadow, you learn that setting boundaries and expressing your needs isn't selfish, but necessary for self-respect. The shadow can also unconsciously influence you through projection. This is when you label others with your repressed traits without even realizing that they are your own. If you frequently become irritated by another person's rudeness, it may indicate an unrecognized tendency toward the same behavior. This doesn't mean the other person is not being rude, but rather that the strong emotional reaction may stem from unresolved feelings within yourself. When certain traits remain unacknowledged, they are projected onto others, creating a distorted view of reality. This happens as your ego attempts to protect your self-image by ricocheting the focus on the external world's flaws instead of confronting your own, leading you to believe that the negative qualities only exist in others. Your shadow began forming in childhood. You would naturally express a full range of emotions, both positive and negative. However, as you grew, certain behaviors were encouraged, while others were discouraged or punished. Traits that were seen as acceptable became reinforced, while those deemed undesirable you learnt to suppress. If you threw a tantrum, you were scolded and sent to your room, teaching you that anger is unacceptable. If you were playful in the classroom, you were reprimanded by a teacher, made to feel ashamed, discouraging spontaneity. Integrating your shadow so that it becomes a benefit to your life requires what Jung calls shadow work. This is crucial not just for personal growth, but also to avoid being controlled and manipulated by other people who want to exploit your shadow. If you fear being weak, Someone will try and control you by calling you overly sensitive, eliciting a strong emotional reaction. If you're ambitious but lack an integrated shadow and understanding of yourself, someone can gaslight you into thinking you're instead selfish for pursuing your desires, making your ego suppress them instead, putting up an unrealistic persona. Shadow work requires constant, non-judgmental reflection of your thoughts and behaviors. If you are too emotional during shadow work, your ego will resist the process, ending in defensiveness or self-criticism. The hidden parts of your psyche often resist awareness, just as dreams quickly fade after waking. Writing down discoveries as they arise ensures they do not slip back into the unconscious. A shadow journal provides a space to document realizations and reflect on patterns. You need to replace the shame or guilt that was instilled into you during childhood with acceptance and understanding. Jung emphasized that everyone has a shadow, no matter how perfect someone may seem. So recognizing your hidden traits is a shared human experience rather than a personal failure. If you do not integrate with your shadow, you risk merging with it instead, where the unconscious aspects of the self overpower the conscious mind. Carl Jung described individuals merged with their shadow as constantly undermining themselves, caught in cycles of self-sabotage, and unable to act with clarity. This dynamic is reflected in the story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll went through the symbolic descent of Nicaea the same way Odysseus did in Greek mythology, journeying into the underworld to learn painful truths about himself. But unlike Odysseus, who ascended again as a better, wiser person, Dr. Jekyll gets trapped, gradually losing control to his darker side until he becomes Mr. Hyde entirely. The third of Jung's four main archetypes is the anima or animus. Jung defined the anima as the unconscious inner feminine side of men, with the animus being defined as the unconscious inner masculine side of women, both being derived from the Latin word for soul. In Jungian psychology, these opposing forces, just like the other archetypes, must be balanced to create a well-integrated self. A man's anima connects him to emotions and relationships, while a woman's animus strengthens her ability to think logically and assert herself. Jung believed they appear in your dreams and affect how you relate to the opposite sex. Through repeated interactions with men or women, you develop an internal understanding of the opposite gender, shaping your anima or animus. Jung considered the anima especially significant because men often repress sensitivity and emotional depth. He saw confronting and integrating anima as even more advanced than facing one's shadow. But as with all archetypes, there are negative and positive sides to them. When it is negative, man is inclined to escape into daydreams and wishful thinking, feeling as if something is sucking away his energy. He wakes up feeling empty or depressed as life seems meaningless. This is the man who dreams about being successful, being loved, or going on an adventure but never takes a real step toward it. Some men hide in books, philosophy, or intellectual discussions, often as a result of them feeling overwhelmed by their mother's influence, trying to escape by living in their minds. They may become intelligent, but their thinking becomes empty as it lacks passion and action. He is the man who is often too attached to his mother and therefore stays immature, avoiding responsibility. He clings to childhood comfort and struggles to deal with the harshness of adult life. This is known as Peter Pan syndrome, the boy who never grew up. In contrast, you have the man who had a bad experience with his mother and becomes resentful of women. Instead of seeing women as individuals, he objectifies them for sexual pleasure, avoiding real emotional connection. These two mother complexes split the anima, disrupting its natural development. Carl Jung believed you saw this mother complex develop in four distinct stages, each representing a deeper level of emotional and psychological growth. He outlined these stages in his book, The Practice of Psychotherapy, beginning with Eve, followed by Helen, then Mary, and finally Sophia, the highest stage of anima development. This journey reflects how a man evolves in his perception of women and his own emotional world, moving from dependency and idealization toward a more balanced and mature relationship with both the feminine aspects within himself and with women in general. The first stage, Eve, named after the biblical Eve, represents the most primitive level of anima development. At this stage, a man's perception of women is entirely tied to their role as caregivers, similar to how a child views their mother. A woman is seen primarily as a provider of nourishment, security, and love. And a man at this stage often feels incomplete without a woman's presence in his life. He may become emotionally dependent, unable to function well on his own, and more likely to be controlled by a woman, or more commonly, by his idealized fantasy of her. Relationships at this stage are often based on need rather than mutual respect or emotional depth. The second stage, Helen, named after Helen of Troy, signifies a shift from dependence to admiration of external qualities. Here, women are perceived as intelligent, self-reliant, and capable of achieving success in the world. A man at this stage acknowledges a woman's ability to be independent and influential, but may still view her through a superficial lens, focusing on beauty, status, or skill rather than deeper emotional or spiritual qualities. This stage often reflects a divide where external accomplishments are valued more than inner depth. A man may be drawn to women who embody success and talent, but struggle to see them as full individuals with their own inner complexity. The third stage, Mary, named after the Virgin Mary, represents a turning point where women are seen as figures of virtue, purity, and moral integrity. At this level, a man moves beyond seeing women as objects of desire or achievement and starts to recognize deeper emotional and spiritual qualities. However, this stage can still involve a level of idealization, where a woman is placed on a pedestal and seen as inherently good or untouchable. A man may respect and admire a woman's inner qualities, but struggle to acknowledge her flaws, making this perception somewhat one-sided and unrealistic. While this stage introduces a greater appreciation for emotional and spiritual depth, it may still lack full integration of both the positive and negative aspects of human nature. Anakin from Star Wars is an example of this stage. He idolizes Padme, seeing her as pure, perfect, and untouchable rather than as a real partner. His anima is underdeveloped, so he clings obsessively to the idea of saving her rather than accepting loss. When reality threatens his fantasy, he becomes unstable, leading to his transformation into Darth Vader. The fourth and final stage, Sophia, named after the Greek word for wisdom, represents the full integration of the anima, showing the positive side of the archetype, symbolizing the point where a man no longer projects an idealized image onto women, but sees them as complex, incomplete individuals with both strengths and weaknesses. At this stage, a man recognizes that no single woman can embody everything he seeks, and that the anima is an inner force within himself, rather than something to be found in another person. This stage allows for a mature, balanced relationship with both women and the feminine aspects of his psyche. An example of a developed anima is Carl in the Disney film Up. He marries a girl called Ellie, and they both support each other emotionally and practically. Their love isn't based on fantasy, but on playfulness and mutual dreams. When Ellie passes away, Carl grieves but eventually honors her memory without losing himself. He starts the movie closed off but learns to embrace life again, proving he has grown through Ellie rather than staying dependent on her. Man tends to overvalue the masculine aspect of his persona, playing the strong man, while the feminine aspect remains unconscious. This naturally leads to negative anima projection, as he is completely unaware of it. Man is highly focused on ego. He is highly rational and centers around the outer world to the detriment of his unconscious. His curse is the imprisonment of the outer world without access to the inner world. Unlike the anima, which Jung saw as a single dominant image in a man's mind, he described the animus as more complex, containing multiple different images that influence a woman. Unlike a man, a woman tends to be more in tune with the inner world at the detriment of rationality in the outer world, according to Carl Jung. In the same way a man's anima is based on his relationship with his mother, a woman's animus is based on her relationship with her father. The negative aspects of the animus lure women away from all human relationships, Filled with desires and judgments about how things ought to be, it saps a woman of her life force and can bring about qualities of brutality and recklessness. But the animus too has a positive side. If a woman realizes who and what her animus is, it can turn into an invaluable inner companion that brings out masculine qualities of initiative, courage, and objectivity. Jung, just as he did for the anima, outlined 4 stages of animus development in women, beginning with Tarzan, followed by Byron, then Lloyd George, and finally Hermes, the highest stage of animus development. The first stage is characterized by raw physical strength, where the animus appears as a figure focused on power and dominance. This is represented by figures like an athletic champion or a heroic adventurer, such as the fictional character Tarzan. At this level, the animus manifests as a force of sheer physicality, influencing a woman's perception of strength and protection. The second stage introduces qualities of action and romance, where the animus takes the form of a man who is passionate, adventurous, and driven, where the animus is no longer just about physical power. Jung associated this stage with figures like the poet Lord Byron, known for his romanticism, or Ernest Hemingway, who was celebrated for his bold and daring lifestyle as a war hero and hunter. At this level, the animus inspires a woman to see action, adventure, or intense emotional experiences. The third stage shifts the animus into the realm of intellect and communication. At this point, it appears as a professor, clergyman, or public speaker, representing logic, reason, and the power of words. Jung compared this stage to influential orators such as Lloyd George, who was known for his speeches and political influence. Here, the animus encourages intellectual growth, guiding a woman's understanding of knowledge, philosophy, and structured thought. The fourth and final stage represents the highest form of animus development, where it becomes a source of wisdom and spiritual insight. In this phase, the animus serves as a guide, bridging the conscious and unconscious mind. Jung compared this to Hermes, the messenger of the gods in mythology, who acts as a mediator between higher knowledge and human understanding. The final of Jung's main archetypes is the self. In Jungian psychology, the concept of the self remains central to understanding the human psyche. Carl Jung describes the self as the integration of both conscious and unconscious elements, both the masculine and feminine, and both the shadow and persona, representing the complete and unified personality. It is not a fixed state, but a dynamic process that unfolds through individuation. Experiences with the self can come in the form of a deep sense of inner peace, such as when a person who has spent years chasing external success suddenly realizes that material achievements do not define them. They begin to feel a strong sense of contentment simply by being in the moment, without the need for validation. Or someone who has struggled with self-doubt and insecurity finally accepts themselves, feeling a newfound inner stability. It can emerge through an overwhelming feeling of being connected to everything. When you are walking alone in nature, you might experience a moment where the trees, sky, and air seem alive in a way you never noticed before. You may also encounter this during meditation or prayer, feeling as though you are not separate from the universe, but part of a vast, interconnected whole. The self can become apparent in moments where you stop suppressing a side of your shadow, instead accepting more of yourself. Artists encounter the self in the moments where their work flows effortlessly, as if guided by a force beyond their conscious mind. The self balances the various parts of your psyche. It serves as the core of your being, encompassing both the known and unknown aspects of your mind. With all 4 of the main archetypes covered, we will now break down 10 archetypal images that form as a result of the main archetypes mixing, starting with the warrior. The warrior archetype, described by Carl Jung, represents the part of the psyche focused on discipline, courage, action, and loyalty. If you have a well-developed warrior archetype, you prioritize self-discipline because the strongest warriors are those who master their minds. By doing so, you gain the focus, willpower, and determination to achieve remarkable things. You act swiftly and decisively without being distracted by doubts or emotions. The warrior's discipline pushes you to continually improve your skills in order to reach your goals. This could be a musician practicing daily to perfect his craft, or an office worker finding new ways to increase efficiency and produce higher quality work. No matter the field, discipline is what drives progress. The warrior's strong sense of loyalty isn't directed at just one person, but rather at something greater, such as a nation, a belief, or a mission. Your sense of devotion values your cause above all, even yourself, making you willing to endure hardships and setbacks in pursuit of your purpose. But you also remain rational, carefully evaluating your abilities and choosing the best course of action rather than wasting effort on impossible battles. You understand and accept that life is finite. Instead of feeling fear or despair, this knowledge fuels your determination to make the most of every moment. You fully embrace life, treating each task as if it were your last. While the warrior can be a positive expression of masculinity, it also has a shadow side. Its detachment from emotions can lead to imbalance. If not properly developed, the warrior can take extreme and destructive forms. One of the most dangerous extremes is the zealot. This is a warrior who is so obsessed with a cause or belief that he loses his morality and ability to think critically. He blindly fights for dominance, viewing anyone who disagrees with him as an enemy who must be destroyed, believing his cause justifies any action. They are the soldiers who no longer fight to protect, but instead to destroy the enemy, even if it means harming innocent lives. The hero archetype's core traits are similar to the warriors in that you are courageous and determined, with a strong guiding purpose. A hero archetype tends to be self-sacrificing, willing to stand against injustice and bring positive change to the world. In stories, the hero often begins as an ordinary person, also known as the everyman, lacking ambition with no purpose in life until there is a call to action, a moment of awakening where you feel forced out of complacency. In The Matrix, Neo is pulled from his mundane existence when he is told that reality is an illusion, compelling him to seek the truth. Similarly, in The Lion King, Simba is forced to confront his destiny after running from his duty. Jung believed that such moments reflect an unconscious recognition of potential, where a person is given the chance to evolve beyond their current limitations. You are faced with fears, doubts, and suppressed emotions that must be confronted. Harry Potter's battle against Voldemort represents not just an external conflict, but also an internal one, where he must grapple with his own capacity for darkness. Jung saw the hero's adversaries as projections of their inner struggles, reinforcing the idea that the journey is as much about self-conquest as it is about defeating an external enemy. In literature, the hero always has to descend into darkness, a moment of profound crisis that tests their resolve. This can take many forms. In Batman Begins, Bruce Wayne experiences the death of his parents and years of personal struggle before transforming into Batman. Some heroes succumb to their inner demons, transforming from the hero into a shadow variant like the Tyrant. The Tyrant is power-hungry, refusing to give up, turning a mission for justice into one of oppression, believing that only they can save the world. Some heroes become self-destructive, turning them into the martyr archetype, where they become addicted to suffering, believing they must sacrifice themselves for others. They ignore their own needs and well-being, and if they don't receive validation for their sacrifices, they become resentful. Spider-Man is an example of this, a boy who is always prioritizing others, leading to a neglected personal life and constant pain. The ruler archetype represents pure authority and is displayed in people who don't just see power as important, but as everything. The ruler takes responsibility not only for his own life, but also for the lives of others. Whether he's called a king, queen, boss, leader, politician, or manager, the ruler is always at the top, shaping the world around them. A ruler's goal is to create wealth and stability, but to do so, they seek complete control. Over time, many heroes may end up becoming rulers themselves. Unlike the hero, who focuses on a single mission, the ruler must consider the needs of an entire community. This makes them a complicated figure, often respected but rarely loved. Even a well-intentioned ruler can be seen as the villain, simply because they cannot meet everyone's demands. Few things are more dangerous than a ruler who falls into darkness. The noble leader can become a ruthless tyrant. The hero who once fought for justice may turn into the very enemy they once opposed. The wise old man archetype is someone who embodies wisdom and experience, often serving as a guide or mentor to those seeking knowledge or personal growth. He is frequently portrayed as a philosopher, sage, or elder who provides insight to the protagonist in films. He shares wisdom that helps others understand their purpose and potential. In Jungian psychology, this archetype is referred to as the senex, a Latin term meaning old man. Though the wise old man often isolates himself in an intellectual realm, removed from human connection and emotional depth, some intellectuals excel at analyzing complex theories and delivering insightful lectures, yet struggle to navigate personal issues or connect with others on an emotional level. They may dismiss anything that does not fit into a strictly rational framework, becoming frustrated by perspectives that rely on emotion. When the shadow side of this archetype is active, you become trapped in excessive intellectualization. You attempt to solve every problem through logic and analysis, and when faced with situations that cannot be neatly rationalized, you become immobilized. You hesitate to enter relationships because you cannot be sure you have found the right person, and you struggle to pursue meaningful work because you question whether it is truly the best path. This ongoing uncertainty can lead to cynicism, as you become painfully aware of the limitations of human knowledge and the flaws inherent in all aspects of life. The shadow senex is also characterized by an obsession with detachment, believing that non-attachment provides ultimate freedom. You refuse to form deep bonds with people, projects, or beliefs. However, this isn't being truly free. It is usually just a way to hide from their fears, unable to risk vulnerability or make meaningful commitments. Emotions and human weaknesses become intolerable, both in yourself and others. This can lead to ascetic tendencies, where you deprive yourself of ordinary joys, creating a state where nothing ever feels truly satisfactory. You resist change, lack warmth, and often carry many regrets of opportunities you never took and the parts of life you left unlived. The explorer archetype is characterized by a longing for an ideal world, driven by the belief that nothing should hold you back. The main desire of this archetype is to experience the freedom that comes with discovering who you truly are through the exploration of the unknown. New experiences are sought after, and routine is escaped in an effort to create a life that feels more authentic and fulfilling. Staying true to yourself while being independent and ambitious is recognized as one of the archetype's greatest strengths. You often relate to this archetype first because it captures your desire to explore and understand the vast world around you. You're someone who thrives on motivation, values your independence, and takes pride in being self-reliant. You reject restrictions and societal norms, preferring to carve your own path by experiencing new things and uncovering the mysteries of life. At your core, you embark on a lifelong journey, always searching for meaning and adventure. Your natural curiosity keeps you engaged in deep thought, constantly analyzing and exploring new ideas. You're highly observant and intellectual, which makes it easy for you to grasp complex concepts. Despite your introspective nature, you are not antisocial. You strongly desire to understand the world and often support and empathize with others. You tend to exhibit extreme self-sufficiency, which can lead you to reject help, insisting on doing everything alone. Sometimes, you may become so withdrawn that you build emotional barriers too high for others to cross. Your reluctance to commit or settle down can lead to aimless wandering or a constant chase for excitement without a clear direction. Such traits appear in the shadow variant, the escapist. You use exploration as a way to escape your problems, continually changing your goals or beliefs, but never finding true meaning. This archetype manifests itself in chronic digital nomads, where they claim to be free but are actually lost in avoiding responsibility. As the destroyer archetype, you act as a force of transformation, breaking down what exists to create space for something new. Although your actions may seem reckless or chaotic, they often carry a deeper purpose. You dismantle the old to make way for change, even if society tends to view you with fear or resistance. People often assume you cannot be heroic, but personal experiences, rather than the true nature of your archetype, shape this perception. When you understand your destructive tendencies, you can control your impulses if you have a meaningful purpose. You shake up the status quo, pushing progress forward through disruption. In societies that are not ruled by oppression, the destroyer has played a role in bringing freedom and challenging outdated systems. Even if you don't strongly embody this archetype, you still benefit from its influence. The stereotype of being drawn to rebellious or disruptive figures arises from the idea that you have the power to reshape the world. At its core, this archetype represents raw human energy, the need to break barriers and force the world to adapt. This is where the stereotype of girls fall for bad boys comes from. More accurately being, girls fall for destroyer boys. You are not consciously seeking trouble, but you are capable of protecting others to the point of changing the world to fit what they need. You are essential because people are vulnerable, and not everyone has the strength to challenge what must be changed. While roles like the warrior and ruler serve the purpose of protection more effectively, you clear the path and make way for something better. However, your detachment from personal bonds can make you seem distant or even ruthless, and when unbalanced, you may harm yourself or others. The sadist manifests as an archetype when you merge with your shadow. You start taking pleasure in watching things fall apart and justify your actions as necessary, while deep down you enjoy the chaos. The maiden archetype, also known as the innocent, represents a pure and untarnished soul, untouched by the hardships of the world. This archetype embodies the sense of wonder and hope that many long to return to later in life. If you are the maiden, you desire happiness not just for yourself, but for everyone, even those who might oppose you. You have sincere motives, and truth is all you know. This unwavering optimism makes you one of the most sympathetic figures, often becoming the heart of a group. You uplift those who have lost hope and inspire others to believe in goodness. Your influence is so strong that you can even convince those who are indifferent to take a stand and fight for a cause with no promise of reward or success. If your feminine energy aligns with the maiden archetype, you likely have a special talent for appreciating the small wonders of everyday life and maintaining an open mind. Despite this purity and innocence, you cannot entirely escape darkness. Your shadow can transform into the damsel. This is when you become a perpetual victim, never taking responsibility for yourself and always needing to be saved. You rely on others to make decisions and refuse to develop independence, quickly becoming the fool. You often feel trapped and powerless without external validation. You may also merge with your shadow in a different way by becoming the temptress. You weaponize your innocence to charm and seduce, using your youth and beauty to manipulate others to do things for you, rather than developing true personal power. You crave attention and validation, and often feel empty without these things. The trickster archetype characterizes someone who disrupts order, challenges rules, manipulates boundaries, and embodies mischief. If you identify with this archetype, you exist in spaces of transition, moving between worlds, shifting definitions, and defying confinement. Whenever someone attempts to pin you down, you slip away, staying one step ahead. You thrive at the edges, always testing limits and reshaping the lines that define reality. You are elusive and unpredictable, forcing those who encounter you to confront their own assumptions. Their naivety, greed, or self-delusion blinds them, making them susceptible to your manipulation. If you are not the trickster, to avoid deception, you must cultivate a certain level of trickery yourself, not to deceive others, but to recognize when deception is at play. Some individuals genuinely believe they are acting for the benefit of others, yet unknowingly mislead them. In these cases, both the deceiver and the deceived remain unconscious of the trickster's presence. Trickster energy becomes disruptive only when it is not acknowledged, operating autonomously in the shadows of human interactions. At times, the trickster within you does not deceive, but instead delivers the truth in ways that seem unbelievable. Others might mistake your honesty for trickery, as you challenge accepted narratives and expose hidden realities. Whether through deception or revelation, your inner trickster forces change, compelling you to see beyond your existing perspectives and embrace uncertainty. The trickster appears in your early childhood as soon as your self-awareness begins to develop. The trickster reflects a phase dominated by primal instincts and immediate gratification. Similar to an infant, it acts impulsively, driven by physical needs and desires, without concern for consequences. It can become cruel, cynical, and lacking in empathy, focused only on fulfilling its impulses. The trickster becomes most noticeable when your life becomes overly rigid or serious. It disrupts your routine by challenging your strict adherence to rules and introducing unpredictability into your structured environments. You manifest this influence in your absent-minded mistakes, slips of the tongue, and unexpected bursts of laughter. It makes you forget what you intended to do, say things you later regret, or reveal hidden truths through Freudian slips. By injecting humor and absurdity in your everyday situations, the trickster reminds you to not take yourself too seriously and helps restore balance when your life becomes too controlled or predictable. Trickster energy arrives like an unpredictable force, shaking you and society from complacency. It forces you to confront uncomfortable truths, using humor and satire to expose contradictions and hypocrisy. For this reason, comedians often embody the trickster's role, delivering messages that provoke thought and reflection. The magician archetype represents your intellectual and curious side, seeking knowledge, understanding, and mastery over complex subjects. Unlike the warrior, who focuses on action and discipline, the magician dives into deep thinking and problem-solving. We call the archetype the magician because its abilities can seem almost supernatural. For example, a skilled programmer can create tools out of nowhere that dramatically increase productivity in ways that might seem impossible to others. Beyond understanding concepts, the magician also seeks to understand people, analyzing their behavior to uncover true intentions and motivations. This makes it the mind's internal lie detector and moral compass, helping you navigate relationships and ethical decisions. When faced with hardship, the warrior might push through pain, but the magician offers wisdom, reminding yourself to rest and recover when necessary. Before fully developing, the magician appears in its early form as the gifted child. This is when you first discover the excitement of learning and sharing knowledge. Curiosity drives you to eagerly explore the world, constantly searching for new information and insights. The difference between this early stage and the fully realized magician is experience rather than mindset. As the gifted child, you have the same thirst for knowledge and desire to help others, but you have not yet gathered the wisdom and depth needed to become a true magician. A shadow variant of the magician is the puppet master, an imbalanced magician who loses control, leading to manipulation and the refusal of responsibility. Since this archetype focuses on knowledge rather than emotions, it sometimes develops without the desire to use your wisdom for good. This can result in two distorted versions, one that controls others for selfish gain and another that actively prevents progress. You might turn people against each other to hide that you are the source of their struggles. You might refuse to treat those who cannot pay, or as a skilled craftsman, you might lock away your knowledge, only sharing it for an excessive fee. You believe you control everything, but in reality, fear traps you. You manipulate others to avoid taking risks yourself, staying in a cycle of endless planning and scheming without ever truly living. Paralyzed by the fear of making mistakes, you avoid decisions entirely, and then you look back with regret at a life spent on the sidelines. On the other extreme of the magician's shadow side is the saboteur who, rather than controlling others, focuses on stopping them from succeeding. You desire the respect and admiration that comes with wisdom, but refuse to do the actual work of learning and helping. Just like the puppet master, you fear taking action, but instead of pulling strings behind the scenes, you make excuses for why you cannot contribute. Simultaneously, you work to tear down others, hoping to make yourself look better by comparison. A common example of the saboteur is someone who criticizes every idea but never offers solutions. Rather than earning recognition through effort and contribution, they seek to gain status by undermining others. Their fear of failure leads them to dismiss the work of those around them, believing that if no one succeeds, they will never have to face their shortcomings. The hate comments under this video exemplify the saboteur archetype at work. The child archetype, representing innocence, potential, new beginnings, and your future self, symbolizes your deepest longing for renewal and wholeness. It appears in myths, fairy tales, and personal dreams as a symbol of hope, growth, and transformation. However, the child archetype is not just about innocence. It has multiple expressions, each able to reveal different aspects of your psychology. These expressions align with four main branches. The first is the divine child. This represents the purest, most transcendent aspects of your child archetype. This part of you remains untouched by the world's corruption and stays connected to a higher power. Mythology often presents the divine child as a miraculous or chosen figure, destined for greatness. Examples include Jesus Christ, Krishna, and Harry Potter. You are a potential savior for a society in need. You represent radical change and the possibility of new beginning. As such, you threaten the status quo. Wicked kings and demonic monsters therefore fight the child. The second is the orphan child. This symbolizes the wounded self, the one who feels abandoned, unloved, or rejected. Many people encounter the orphan child archetype in their lives, even when they are not literal orphans. You may experience this when you feel disconnected from your family, whether due to differences in beliefs, values, or personality. Regardless, this experience often leads you to a deep sense of isolation and a struggle to feel a sense of belonging in the world. You frequently feel unrecognized for your unique qualities and talents. Without a strong sense of guidance or support from parental figures, you may experience uncertainty and a lack of direction. The challenge for you with this archetype is to realize that although you may not feel at home in your external environment, you have the power to create a sense of home within yourself. Cultivating inner security and self-acceptance is essential in overcoming feelings of abandonment. The wounded child represents the third child archetype. This is someone who entangles themselves in feelings of victimization, reliving past suffering, and experiencing emotions of hopelessness, unworthiness, and heaviness. You frequently feel abandoned, misunderstood, and unloved, sometimes even by yourself. Your sensitivity to the emotions of others can be so strong that you struggle to distinguish between your feelings and those of the people around you. An early emotional wound shaped this archetype and influences how you perceive your life and the actions of others. These experiences typically occur at a young age when you are highly impressionable, creating a lens through which you interpret the world. This perspective, shaped by pain, defines and colors every aspect of your reality. For you, if you remain stuck in the shadow side of the archetype, this wound becomes a source of ongoing suffering. Your early experiences as a wounded child may involve bullying, the loss of a parent, severe injury, chronic illness, abuse, neglect, or witnessing a traumatic event. Unresolved childhood trauma can shape your adult relationships and experiences, often leading you to unconsciously recreate familiar dynamics. If bullies targeted you in childhood, you may continue to feel mistreated by your colleagues and friends. If a parent abused you, you may develop a deep distrust of authority figures, seeing bosses, institutions, and governments as sources of oppression. When you are caught in the shadow form of the wounded child, you fixate on the past, turning both painful and joyful memories into a lingering sense of sadness. You might believe that if a particular painful event had never happened, your life would have unfolded as it was meant to. You might resist change deeply because you associate healing with transformation, and transformation feels like another loss. Instead, you cling tightly to what remains, whether that is an identity, a role, or even an emotion like anger, sadness, or resentment. Letting go of past suffering, or how you define yourself, or how others perceive you, can feel unbearable. You constantly long to be seen, heard, and acknowledged for the suffering you have endured. Deep down, you believe in an external source, a person, event, or experiences will finally fix what feels broken and bring healing. This belief leads you to either overcompensate by striving for perfection and success, or remain trapped in victimhood, expecting others to recognize your pain. Then there is the eternal child. Carl Jung described it as one of the fundamental structures of the human mind. On one hand, it symbolizes your creativity, potential, and hope for the future. On the other hand, when this archetype is not balanced, it manifests in you as immaturity, avoidance of responsibility, and a reluctance to face the realities of adulthood. If the eternal child archetype heavily influences you, you may delay moving out of your parents' house until your late 20s or early 30s, hiding in pleasures that manifest through a video game addiction, alcohol, or casual sex. You might feel frightened of the outside world and the obstacles you will have to face when confronting it. You may overly depend on your mother, who naturally only wants to protect her child, keeping you in a seemingly warm, nurturing loop where you are safe from the cold, cruel world. But this means you struggle to hold or even get a job, remaining in a sleepy daze where from the outside, all someone might want to do is pour a bucket of icy water on your head, waking you up from your fantasy within. You may view yourself as a genius, the next big philosopher, or believe that you possess something special and unique, that you are an artist with no art, no tangible product to show this genius. Everyone carries aspects of the child archetype within them, and different versions may dominate at different points in life. If you embrace the divine child, you can unlock spiritual growth. If you heal the wounded child, you can overcome past trauma. If you balance the eternal child, you can maintain creativity without avoiding responsibility. If you integrate the orphan child, you can find inner security. Specific events or interactions activate archetypes hidden in your unconscious. Once they surface into your consciousness, they take shape based on your personal experiences and cultural influences. Jung saw them as dynamic forces that constantly seek expression in your personality and behavior. You cannot directly observe archetypes themselves, but you infer their presence through recurring themes in human history, storytelling, and personal experiences. For Jung, archetypes went beyond mental structures. They linked your mind and the physical world. He described an underlying reality that connects all things, calling it unus mundus, or one world. Archetypes serve as the bridge between this deeper reality and your everyday experiences. Carl Jung spent much time trying to understand another concept that he believed also bridged the gap between your mind and the external world, which he called synchronicity. He introduced synchronicity to describe events that happen at the same time and seem meaningfully connected, even though no clear cause links them. Jung described a famous example of this happening with a highly rational, emotionally closed-off young woman he was treating. Jung recalled that during one of his sessions with her, she described a dream in which someone gave her a golden scarab, a sacred symbol in ancient Egypt, representing transformation and rebirth. As she recounted the dream, Jung heard a tapping sound behind him. When he turned around, an insect was repeatedly hitting the closed window. He opened it and caught the creature as it flew inside. It was a rose chafer beetle, closely resembling the golden scarab from the woman's dream. This type of beetle does not typically try to enter dark indoor spaces, making the event highly unusual. Jung presented the beetle to his patient, saying, "Here is your scarab." The synchronicity shocked the woman, shattering her rigid philosophical way of thinking, which had made progress nearly impossible. The moment forced her to consider deeper unconscious forces at play in her life. After the event, she started opening up emotionally and was finally able to progress in therapy, despite 2 other therapists failing to make this happen before Jung. Jung spent a long time reflecting on how these patterns of meaningful coincidences often become too striking to ignore. He believed that if synchronicity was more than just a coincidence, it would suggest that the unconscious mind isn't separate from the outer world, but instead is woven into the fabric of reality, able to guide, influence, and interact with it. You might think about an old friend you haven't seen in years, and suddenly they call you that day. It's almost as if your unconscious can send signals, communicating with events in the real world. You might dream of a death symbol and then suddenly experience something life-changing the next day. Jung found it difficult to gather empirical evidence for this concept, and he even acknowledged that people might see synchronistic events as random from a statistical standpoint, but they could nonetheless carry personal meaning to those who experience them. Continuing our exploration of Carl Jung and the psychiatric landscape, we must discuss Jung's theories of introversion and extroversion. Introversion he defines as a psychological orientation where your inner world primarily influences you, while external stimuli hold secondary importance. This inward orientation can take different forms, such as intellectual reflection, emotional depth, intuitive insights, or sensory awareness. Introversion can be either active or passive. In an active state, you deliberately withdraw from external influences, seeking solitude and introspection. In a passive state, you might struggle to re-engage with the outer world, as your attention naturally retreats inward. This can be in the form of zoning out when someone talks to you. When this inward focus becomes a dominant and a habitual pattern, people consider you to have an introverted personality type. Extroversion, on the other hand, is when you direct your attention to your surroundings and engage with the external world in a direct and observable way. Extroversion can also manifest actively or passively. In an active form, you consciously seek interaction and engagement with the outside world. In a passive form, external events naturally draw your interest, even without intentional effort. When you habitually focus outward, people consider you to have an extroverted personality type. While you may display both introverted and extroverted tendencies at different times, one typically dominates your personality's mode of functioning. Jung believed that well-developed individuals tended to favor one orientation while still integrating aspects of the other. Though Jung saw introversion and extroversion as psychological types, you should recognize that they often show associated behavioral tendencies as well. As an introvert, you are generally quiet, reflective, and somewhat difficult to understand. You tend to think before acting and approach unfamiliar situations with caution. This doesn't mean you lack confidence, even if others might sometimes consider you shy. As an extrovert, however, you are often more outgoing, open, and easier to read. You are action-oriented, inclined to act first and reflect later, and less hesitant when encountering new experiences. Being outwardly focused, you as an extrovert are naturally adaptable and responsive to your environment. However, this adaptability can come at a cost. Because you rely so much on external input, you may struggle to connect with your inner emotions or develop a strong sense of self-awareness. You might prioritize fitting in over reflecting on your deeper needs. If you are an introvert, you tend to resist external change, sometimes wisely maintaining stability when unnecessary changes arise. However, this same tendency can cause you to resist change even when it is necessary. Your focus on internal experiences can make you appear disconnected from your surroundings, as you often overlook or dismiss external cues. And remember that the unconscious compensates for the conscious. The dominant attitude you have will lead you to adopt the opposite orientation in your unconscious. An introvert has an extroverted unconscious, while an extrovert has an introverted unconscious. This dynamic can make an introvert act impulsively in stressful situations, or it can make an extrovert afraid of being alone if they do not properly integrate both attitudes with the self. To create a more balanced approach, introverts can benefit from becoming more aware of their environment and recognizing when it is appropriate to adapt. In the same way, extroverts can strengthen their self-awareness by looking inward and learning when to stand firm instead of simply adjusting to their surroundings. Carl Jung developed a system based on the two attitude types, introversion and extroversion, showing how you can focus your energy, combined with 4 functions. When you mix these 2 branches, you form the 8 psychological types. 2 of these functions focus on perception, which are sensation and intuition, and the other 2 focus on judgment, which are thinking and feeling. Sensation-focused individuals observe what is real, tangible, and noticeable through the senses. Sensation types trust facts and practical experiences over abstract ideas. Intuition-focused individuals seek patterns, possibilities, and deeper meanings beyond what is immediately seen. Intuitive types trust hunches, visions, and their gut instead of physical evidence. Thinking-focused individuals rely on logic, analysis, and objective reasoning to make decisions. Thinking types value truth, fairness, and facts over emotions. Feeling-focused individuals use personal values and emotions to make decisions. Feeling types prioritize harmony, relationships, and human connection over strict logic. The dominant function paired with the preferred attitude shapes an individual's conscious personality. It determines whether you belong to one of these 8 types. The extroverted rational types, which include extroverted thinking and extroverted feeling, can lose touch with who they really are and what they truly believe in. Extroverted irrational types, which include extroverted sensation and extroverted intuition, tend to struggle with impulsiveness, irrational fears, or difficulty staying grounded when their unconscious emerges. Introverted rational types, which include introverted thinking and introverted feeling, often struggle with external adaptation, sometimes becoming overly introspective or rigid in their beliefs. Introverted irrational types, which include introverted sensation and introverted intuition, may become disconnected, overly absorbed in their inner world, or prone to unrealistic fears. While your dominant function shapes your conscious personality, a secondary function also plays a supporting role. This auxiliary function provides balance and enhances decision-making. Thinking types may develop sensation to ground their ideas in reality, while intuitive types may use feeling to refine their insights with emotional awareness. The auxiliary function helps prevent excessive reliance on the dominant function, creating psychological stability. In 1907, Carl Jung met Sigmund Freud, the founder of psychoanalysis, for the first time after admiring his work for years. Their first conversation lasted over 13 hours, according to Jung. Freud, a more established figure than Jung at the time, saw Jung as his intellectual heir, someone who would carry on his work in psychoanalysis. However, over time, Jung began disagreeing with Freud's narrow view of dream analysis. By 1912, Jung was convinced that Freud's theory of dreams was too limiting, with Freud believing they just showed someone's sexual desires. Carl Jung then published his book, Psychological Types and Symbols of Transformation, which further challenged Freud's ideas. This deeply offended Freud, causing them to cut ties in 1913, considering Jung a traitor to psychoanalysis, making it one of the most famous splits in psychology history. In this section, we will go over exactly what Jung's deep beliefs on dreams were that justified him parting ways with his idol and one of the most renowned psychologists in the world. Carl Jung believed that dreams offered an insight into what was happening in the unconscious mind, the things that when you are awake, you are unwilling or unable to see. Intuitions or gut feelings that are not consciously processed, subtle hunches about the true character of other people, as well as self-deceptions we believe about ourselves. As Jung puts it, the unconscious is the dark being within that hears what our conscious ears do not hear and sees what our conscious eyes do not perceive. We only become aware of this unheard hearing, this unseen seeing, when the unconscious sends us these forgotten images in dreams. Dreams can tell you about your own health or sickness, long before any overt symptoms show. There is a story of a woman who had a recurring dream where she was being attacked by a dark, shadowy figure, but no matter how hard she fought back, she couldn't escape. At first, she believed it represented psychological stress, but as the dream kept intensifying, she felt compelled to get a medical checkup. Surprisingly, tests revealed that she had early-stage breast cancer long before she noticed any physical symptoms. Illness can manifest itself in dreams through other symbols like being chased or your teeth falling out, potentially being a signal of dental problems, a nutrient deficiency, or anxiety-related health issues. Dreams can also warn you of the type of future that may manifest if you continue your current ways. Jung recalls an example of one of his colleagues, an amateur mountaineer, who explained to Jung that he had a dream that he was climbing a mountain, and the higher he climbed, the better he felt. When he reached the mountain's peak, he wanted to continue to climb, and so he stepped off the summit into thin air, and suddenly he awoke. Jung intuitively felt this dream to be a warning from the unconscious. He encouraged his colleague to take extra precautions on any future climbs or avoid them altogether. But the man did not listen. 3 months later, he went climbing, and in the words of Jung, a guide standing below saw him literally step out into the air while descending a rock face. He fell on the head of his friend, who was waiting lower down, and both were dashed to pieces far below. Dreams play an undeniable role in the creative process. Dmitri Mendeleev saw in his dreams chemical elements arrange themselves in a logical structure. When he woke up, he quickly wrote it all down, and it turned out to be the correct structure of the periodic table. The Beatles member, Paul McCartney, came up with the tune yesterday in his sleep, describing it as if a complete song just dropped into my lap. Mary Shelley had a nightmare of a man being brought to life by electricity in a lab, forming the plot for Frankenstein. The most common dreams you have, according to Jung, are what he calls compensatory dreams. These function to correct for one-sidedness or errors in your consciousness. In other words, the more you evade important tasks in life, the more you will be visited by dreams of a compensatory nature. For example, if you haven't been to see your parents in a while, you may start having troubling dreams of them dying or suffering. If you are someone who over-identifies with your persona, you will have dreams of committing crimes or engaging in immoral behavior so that you see the unconscious shadow of your personality. It would be convenient if your dreams just told you clearly what they wanted your conscious to know. That way, you wouldn't have to decipher all their symbols and metaphors. This does not happen, however, as the unconscious is by nature irrational. It does not operate by the laws of logic, unlike the conscious. To better understand your dreams, it is worth keeping a dream journal by your bed so you can catch the memories before they fade as you go about your day. When trying to interpret your dreams, use knowledge of mythology, religion, and recurring symbols that are found cross-culturally. You will know when you stumble upon the correct dream interpretation when, in the words of Jung, the interpretation clicks. When there is a feeling that it absolutely hits the fact, one knows one is on the right track. Carl Jung wouldn't always be able to interpret his dreams straight away, but he would carry them with him throughout the day. If he came across something in a book or experience which reminded him of a dream image, he would add it to that image so that a fabric of ideas developed with a constantly increasing richness. And now, a black screen. Why? Because it looks like you've made it to the end of the video, which either puts you in the top 1% of patient people or means your autoplay has gone rampant. Regardless, if you want to see more videos like this, from me or other creators, pressing the like button tells YouTube to recommend you similar content. It helps me out a lot too.